Episode 4 of Season 2 of Reacher is here, and what a way to continue on from the debut week with the first 3 episodes. With Swan getting put under the line of fire in the minds of his closest friends, Finlay making a return, developments occurring on the case with the uncovering of Project Little Wing, and these folks actually gaining their wings after a run-in with the 1/10th. Let's jump into the episode and break down all that there was to take away from it. Here is Reacher Season 2 Episode 4 Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. A Night at the Symphony was an episode that was pretty much building towards that specific moment. The securing of Mr. Boyd at the Symphony, the person who was working with Senator Lavoie on anti-missile technology that had been developed into a devastating weapon. What was once created for the purpose of being anti-missile technology turned into something which could be put inside of a missile and instead meant that it would never fail to hit its target, going from being something that was defensive to offensive. This was something which was deeply connected with New Age technology, and the Director of Security, Mr. Langston, as he was the person who was essentially heading it up. Alongside Mr. Langston, there was Swan, a former member of the 1/10th unit who had gone missing and was actually quite high up the chain at New Age. He was the Assistant Director of Security at the company. Last week I mentioned how I felt that Swan could potentially be involved in what was going on and be connected to the fact that the members of the 1/10th unit were being killed, and that he now could have gone on the run because he was anticipating Reacher and the other members eventually cottoning onto what was happening. But I don't feel like that's the case anymore. It's too obvious of an outcome to happen. Plus, the show was trying to lure us down that specific path in this episode by making us raise suspicions over the character. We saw a flashback of when the group were in their army unit, and they'd just secured a large amount of narcotics off of the street. However, one of the bricks was missing, and it was found under the passenger seat in Swan's car. He simply brushed over it as if it had just fallen down there, but people were questioning his motive. This to me is the show luring us down a pathway of them wanting us to believe something that might be true when it actually isn't. Maybe Swan was aware of what New Age were doing, and he was working on some kind of undercover job there in order to try and bust them open from the inside. Everybody has been in their own line of work since the unit was dismantled, and there's nothing to say at the moment that Swan wasn't doing something on his own in that regard, rather than reaching out to the 1/10th. The fact that he's not there and his house was in a complete state with the dog being dead could be something that's showing us that he managed to make it out of there alive and go on the run. Or he could be Langston's newest victim upon maybe finding out his true motives for being there, and he could be getting tortured or being held prisoner, hence why no body has been found yet. Because if you think about it, all of the other bodies were found. Another person that went missing in this episode in a very similar fashion to Swan was Marlo Burns and her daughter. Her house was in a complete mess, and it didn't seem like the house of somebody who had made an escape. Her safe bag full of cash was still there, her kids' video games were all still there, and many of the lights were on. So I think it's clear to see that something has happened to her. Her and Swan shared several emails together, back and forth, and they clearly worked closely with one another. So maybe they've both been taken to the same place after being found out that they were up to something. Finlay's return. This episode saw a much loved character return to the show, and I'm not gonna lie, when he popped up on screen I was so happy. Hearing Reacher say that if this man was in the army I'd have had him in the 1/10th, it was something that I didn't expect to come out of his mouth. But it showed the level of respect that Reacher has for Finlay following everything that happened in Season 1. I was hoping we'd get a "have you heard from Roscoe" in their conversation, but we sadly didn't. Finlay was working for the police force again, despite saying that he wasn't going to in the season finale, and he helped Reacher bust Mr. Boyd as part of their plan to get him to reveal the sensitive information about Project Little Wing and the Senators Association. With Finlay appearing in the episode, that most definitely opens up the possibility for Roscoe to return in this season too. We know that Finlay was from Boston prior to him going to Margrave, so the connection was quite easy to make, and I should have seen it coming. But it was a nice surprise to see him appear. Margrave is further away in terms of geographical location, but it's still a possibility, as remember, Reacher went to New York in Season 1. With regards to Finlay, it seems like he was still mourning his wife, but was on a better track. He still had the dog Jack, which we last saw him with, and he was living an overall more positive life. Hopefully we get the opportunity to see him again, maybe towards the finale when it comes to uncovering the entire operation, and what remains of the 1/10th may need more assistance. AM's motives. AM is proving to be an extremely interesting chap. We still know next to nothing about him other than the fact that he uses the initials AM as part of his aliases in order to go undetected. Within this episode, he went to the plastic surgeon that looked exactly like him. He killed him, and he took on the identity of the doctor, meaning that this alias wouldn't flag through on any system when he tried to travel. He's a brutal, heartless killer who kills innocent people in order to make a slight gain on the criminal offenses that he commits. But we still don't truly know what his motive is. We know that he's working with Mr. Langston as they were arranging to meet in episode 3 of the show, and he's looking to purchase the weapons off of him. So it seems like this anti-missile technology that's been converted is hot property, and AM seems to want to acquire it to use in acts of terror, as it's able to take down things the size of commercial aircrafts. So it seems like devastation is on the way if Reacher and what remains of the 110th can't intervene. Mr. Boyd said in the episode how the technology was essentially in safe hands and that there was nothing to worry about because it was created to keep the country safe. But I think that's going to come back to being an important line because we truly know that that's not going to be the case at all, and that AM has alternative motives and so does Mr. Langston, and he's selling weapons over to individuals to use as they please. There was a moment in this episode where a scene was cut short where AM was about to reveal why it was that he likes reading comic books, something that he's done in all major scenes where he's been in a public space. The fact that it was cut before the reveal shows that there's a reason as to why it's got a heavy focus. One would assume that it's to maybe make him blend in more in public, or maybe he's inspired by the heroes or villains in the novels. But I feel it could be a symbolic reflection of the fact that there's always a hero and a villain, and they're never truly that far apart. With AM being similar to what Reacher is in terms of being a reflection of himself, but just a darker one that doesn't take morals into consideration, I think it could almost be shining a light to us as the viewer on just how similar both AM and Reacher are. Ruthless killers, but one does for good and the other just does. Reacher's mindset. One thing that's interesting to see unfolding in this season of the show is the development of Reacher's mind and the internal thoughts that he has about his sole responsibility for every death that has happened, and the fact that Swan might be a traitor. We saw this present in the first few episodes when he was talking about Franzi, as he was just a young kid who was personally recruited into the 110th Division and ultimately died because of the secrets that he was keeping and he didn't want to share the information. So there are odd moments where we get a close-up of Reacher where it seems like he truly feels the weight and burden of the deaths that have happened. Like them almost signing up to join the 110th all of those years ago was him facilitating them signing a death sentence without them even knowing it. This was also tied into the ending of the episode where Reacher said that he wanted to throw Mr. Langston out of a helicopter, just like what happened with Franz, so the emotional weight of it all is still weighing heavy on his mind. Neely said that he shouldn't feel like that because it's a stupid way of thinking, but it seems like it's going to be the way that he's going to be continuing to think. Despite not seeming it, he can be an emotional guy, especially when it comes to people that he cares for, so this is definitely allowing us to see a different side of Reacher in this season of the show. Overall review. I thought this was a really good episode of the show. That final fight scene with the biker gang was just top notch and one of the best that we've seen in the entirety of the show. It's up there with the prison fight scene. The way Reacher broke the bones of the guy in front of him and then proceeded to pull the guy off the bike with the chain, it showed just how brutal and badass he was. I'm definitely enjoying the somewhat larger scale impact of this season. The first one was obviously all about corruption in a small community and the deaths that were occurring there, but this one having a national consequence is something that has upped the stakes in a good way. I'm glad we got to see Finlay again. I don't know if we'll see more of him in this season, but I'd like to. I don't know if it's warranted, it's just pure nostalgia as the reason as to why I'd like to see him back, but like I said before, there's definitely a possibility that Roscoe could come back, which would make things interesting between Reacher and Dixon. With us now being halfway through the season, I'm looking forward to seeing what this next half is going to bring. So, there you have it, Reacher Season 2 Episode 4 Ending Explained.